Today's session is a very important topic because I find myself discussing this very topic with a lot of our portfolio companies, which is around accelerating enterprise sales with value selling, uncovering and being able to communicate value in a sales motion. And this is, again, one of those topics that is going to be extremely beneficial, especially for those of you who are founders and doing founder-led sales. My name is Tony Yang. I'm the head of growth at Mucker. And my main role, like I like to say in all of these sessions, is I have the privilege of being able to work with many of our portfolio companies and founders to help them figure out how to scale their business. And a lot of times, I'm sure they are sick of hearing from me, which is why we started these expert series where we invite, another person, a third-party expert, one of our preferred partners or vendors or, thought leaders to join us. And today we have the privilege of having Mike Genstil, who is the founder and CEO of ValueCore. He is a personal friend of one of our founding partners, Eric, and we're excited to have Mike teach us about the concept and topic of value selling. So Mike, great to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here and excited to connect with all of you. And for those of you in the Mucker portfolio, congratulations. It is an honor and a privilege. You have a fantastic organization and ecosystem. So my goal today is to help you all understand best practices around uncovering your value proposition and then communicating that to customers to help you close more enterprise sales. Thought I would just start out by giving you a little bit of background on how I got to this particular place in my career with this company. Like you, I'm a founder and have been evolving as a business person and a product builder these past several years. So started my career as a computer scientist doing programming. I got a BS in computer science at Stanford. I have always loved math. And back in my day, the in vogue thing to do was to become a strategy consultant. So although I was writing software in my summer jobs, I went to the dark side and became a consultant for a few years. Went back into product and tech because I missed it too much and decided that I really liked being with people. So ended up getting into the biz dev group at Adobe in the document security solution. We actually had the first booth at the RSA security conference that Adobe had ever had back in 2005. So that was a fun time and place to be. Pivoted to becoming a founder as I started to encounter problems as a passive real estate investor doing spreadsheet analysis on cash flow and rate of return and cap rate on small investment properties. And so based on my years at Adobe, we actually leveraged a very in vogue technology at the time called Flash and Cold Fusion to build an app that you could put on your website to do sensitivity analysis on investment properties. That had its day and it was a useful little app. But what happened was folks in the San Francisco Bay Area who are Salesforce.com employees or alumni said, hey, you've got a cool little thing here. What if you made it a generic ROI analysis tool? Because sometimes what we're selling requires an ROI analysis. And so we built a little app, then kind of moved it over to the LAMP stack, which was cool at the time, and did some conference booth hopping at some trade shows, and people at companies like VMware and elsewhere said, hey, this is kind of cool because I've got one of these as a spreadsheet. And so we created an app that has evolved several times since then. We've been effectively iterating on product market fit and on our message and landed on the concept of ValueCore, which means value should be core to every touch in the customer journey from pre-sales through post-sales. So that's our mission today, which is to help founders, sellers, marketers, product leaders to convert their product features into value-based messages that help you to advance sales cycles and win corporate deals. So this is probably motherhood and apple pie for most of you. It is important to know that leading analysts at Gartner and elsewhere are studying this category and confirming year over year and increasingly in the last 1 to 2 years, the importance that buyers place around value articulation. And it's important to note that the research shows that quantifying pain and quantifying value, even at the top of the funnel, is valuable, just as important as we go through the customer journey, through SQL opportunity to meetings and close. So this is why we're all here. I think we know this. It's important to remember that it actually works as well. The research shows that to the extent you are able to quantify pain and quantify value, you will raise your win rate, you will raise your deal size, you'll grow faster. And there was a CFO panel a few months ago which indicated that CFOs have gotten more involved in the last 12 months, both in new purchases as well as renewal purchases. So we just need to build this muscle as go-to-market organizations of quantifying pain and quantifying value at each step in the customer journey. And I think it's easy to understand this at a high level. And of course, we need to drink our own champagne, as we say, and say, well, what does this mean to you? Maybe you've got a team of one salesperson as a founder. Maybe you've got two. Maybe you've got 5 or 8. The idea is that you're going to lose deals. We all lose deals. They slip from one quarter to the next, one year to the next, one budgeting cycle to the next. And they slip for a variety of reasons. But the reasons include the buyer can't quantify their existing cost structure. They don't understand your new solution fully in the sense of what's the risk of installing it, how long will it take to install it, what are the benefits. Or if they get points 1 and 2, they still can't convince their CEO or their CFO or their buying team that it's better to spend money here now this year than somewhere else, or the value doesn't justify the investment. And so what this chart is intending to indicate is for a team of 5 sellers that might be losing 10 deals per year to quantifying cost, 13 a lack of understanding, you're going to get some of these back. And this could be worth several more deals over the course of the year. So it matters for us to get this right. And I think that's, again, probably something we all get, but that's how we would quantify the value of getting this right. So what we're trying to understand today is some hands-on action topics and hoping to come out of this with next steps and things that you can actually start doing to improve this for your own business. So the first question is, where do we introduce this in the sales process? How can I uncover my value drivers to the extent that I don't have them fully fleshed out or quantified? How do I create calculations? What can I use for benchmarks? And then what if my customer doesn't share their actual data? These questions come up across the board pretty much nearly every time that we engage with a marketing leader, sales leader, customer success leader. And we've been doing this a number of years, so we have some best practices we want to walk through today. So the first concept is, when should we do this? And the answer is early, right? So to the extent we can, even in discovery, and by the way, what this chart represents is a prototypical sales process for a company using MEDDIC or a derivative, which is a leading sales methodology. But you might be using Challenger sale, you might be using command of the message. There's several different sales methodologies. They all have a number of components from discovery through qualifying, through preparation, through proposal. The big idea here is that we want to, even during discovery, collect initial data from the customer that can seed a quantified pain statement or cost of the existing environment. So we're not in a position when it's 3 months down the road, and we're putting a $50,000 or a $250,000 price quote in front of a buyer that we're then scrambling to create an ROI. We want to understand early in the process that they have a problem which is worth $1 million or $5 million. So my $50,000 price quote sounds reasonable in that context. That's the idea. So what we want to do is leverage discovery to create a picture of their pain, which includes both qualitative and quantitative elements. Qualitatively, we need to say, yes, A, B, and C are challenges. And so they can agree with that at the business unit level, as well as when we roll up to the financial buyer, at the financial level. And then quantitatively, let's add it up and create some notion of how much we're spending in my on people, the best in class, and then possibly even revenue that might be slipping thanks to not having a best in class solution. So that's what
Hey,
we want to
Mike.
try to. Yes.
Mike, I think you froze for about 5 seconds or 10 seconds there. So could you just rewind and restate what you just said?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Sorry about that. So what we're trying to do is to both qualify and quantify the existing environment in terms of where are they spending money with third parties, where are they spending money with people that might not be as efficient as it could be, what's their opportunity cost on things that they are not doing with 100% accuracy, and then where is revenue slipping, either through new customers they could be acquiring or existing customers that are churning because they're not doing the best that they could with those customers. That's what we're going to try to create in terms of a cost of the existing environment or cost of business as usual. Okay, so now we're going to dive into 4 main categories that pain and value can flow into. And these 4 categories have versions across the sector that you're in. So if you're on this call and you're a cybersecurity vendor, or if you're selling into a healthcare type of buyer, or you're selling into an HR tech, if you're selling HR tech, all of your buyers are going to care about these different components, from hard cost to productivity to revenue or outcomes, and then risk. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through systematically how we can uncover these types of areas of current cost and benefit, what independent of your product or segment that you're selling into. And so I think these categories, are somewhat self-explanatory, but I want to just touch on each of them briefly. Hard cost means dollars that I'm spending with organizations outside of my company. So it's I'm not spending it on staff, but I'm buying materials, I'm buying software, I'm buying technology, I'm spending money on airplane tickets, all of these things. And I'm going to give you a few more examples across sectors, but this is what I'm spending outside of the company. Productivity is the people on my team. I'm paying them a salary, I'm paying them bonuses. Their time is not as well spent as it could be. They could be redirecting some of their time to higher value added activities, or they're wasting time doing things that could be automated. Revenue loss is in 2 main buckets. One is I'm not acquiring customers as fast as I could because they're leaking as they go through the funnel, or they're churning. I'm losing more customers than I could be or should be. And then the fourth is risk. Risk is things are happening periodically in my organization that are causing money, causing time. So for example, if I'm an accounting firm, when I'm closing the books, I make a mistake once a month. That's risk. I want to reduce that error rate. If I've got a supply chain, things that are coming off my supply chain, I have wastage 2% of the time. 2% of the time. I want to minimize that wastage. I'm in cybersecurity. I have breaches that are happening once a year, and I want to minimize that. Those are the different flavors of these things we're trying to minimize. Okay, so I want to interject this visual simply to state that most of what I'm going to walk through today relates to value drivers and how we uncover them and how we create relevant calculations. But I want to make sure that there's a North Star where you want to be directing all of this effort, which is to create something that you will be able to share with your business sponsor that then can be shared internally in the organization that shows visually in a compelling way the roll-up of the value estimates across these categories: risk, cost savings, productivity gains, risk savings, both in a year 1 version, and depending on what you're selling and the horizon of the buyer, possibly a multi-year version. You may or may not show multi-year depending on what you're selling, but this is compelling. So keep in the back of our minds that we're going to want to visualize this at the end of the day. Okay, so let me go through the first category, which is hard cost savings. The reason we like to start here is because if we do this right and we have some conviction that we are saving our buyers money with third parties, we can almost create a fiduciary responsibility for our buyer to take a look at our solution seriously. And by that, I mean, if you can tell the CFO of your buyer that they're spending call it $100,000 today on solutions A, B, and C. But if they can shift some of their spend over to you, they could save $30,000 to $50,000 across those vendors and only pay you $25,000. Well, they kind of need to take a look at that and verify that. And there's some categories where this is actually true. So we need to really investigate this based on what we're selling. So I'm going to zoom out and talk about, when we think about hard cost savings, and I know the people on the call right now are selling a whole variety of solutions that may fall into these types of buckets, from accounting back office software to cybersecurity solutions to healthcare solutions. And I think as we go through Q&A, if you want to kind of raise your hand and mention which category you're in and talk about hard costs in your category, we can do that. But I'll just point to a couple of these. To the extent that you are helping your buyer save money on their AWS spend or Google Cloud spend or Azure spend, that is fantastic, whether it's CPU, storage, et cetera. And some of our customers are actually, that is their primary value prop. You're spending X today on AWS, you're going to save that based on our compression algorithms, et cetera. Other customers of ours are helping with technology that optimizes fleets of trucks. And if you've got a fleet of trucks, one of your primary costs is fuel. And so if you can say, hey, I'm going to optimize your routes and have that same fleet of trucks get to the same number of jobs, but drive fewer miles, that's fuel savings back in your pocket. These are excellent things to be able to talk about. Cybersecurity, we're spending a lot of money on auditors, fines, penalties, et cetera. Those can be reduced. So this is just, a snapshot of the kinds of things that we're helping our customers identify and quantify. Again, we can come into specific categories if we like through Q&A. Okay, so how do we do this? So if we want to get a good understanding of the landscape of our customers' hard costs, the first thing to think about is, who is our buying persona? All right, are we selling into the VP of IT? Are we selling into the VP of HR? Are we selling into the chief financial officer of a hospital? Okay, those folks, they have a whole list of expenses, that they're spending money on every year, probably, 50 to 200 categories of where they're spending, depending on, how broad their scope is. And what we're hoping to do is isolate, for all those categories, which are the ones that our product is adjacent to and could possibly displace or help optimize, okay? Once we've got those categories, we need to have some notion of a pricing guide for what they might be spending on those solutions. Now, if you're a larger company, you tend to have a competitive intelligence person that does this research. If you're a smaller company, you may not have that person. However, we can get to these data points through primary research, i.e. talking to friendlies, who are executives at our buying organizations, and have them walk through this with us. Google and AI can give us some good answers as well, and I'll show an example of that in a moment. And then what we want to do is create kind of a pricing guide and table that has a way to compute a starting point analysis based on something we can learn or identify. And it's often total employees, and as a proxy, total revenue, that can help us get to a back of the envelope estimate for what they might be spending in a particular category. And there's definitely derivatives of this based on the sector, which we can talk through. Now, let's say, I'm going to just create a real example here. So let's say I'm selling a cybersecurity solution, which is often bought by a chief information security officer or a CISO. Our friends at OpenAI give us actually a pretty good answer to the question, what are the primary areas where the CISO spends money? And voila, these are some categories that are, security software and tools: antivirus, anti-malware, encryption, firewall, intrusion detection, IPS, and SIM systems. And notice there's a whole bunch of other categories as well: training and awareness, consulting, compliance and risk management. So with a little bit of work, I can now create a list of possible categories of spend. And then as part of my discovery, what I want to do is determine, are they spending money in this category? If so, who are they spending with? Maybe they'll share with us if I'm building a relationship, and roughly how much might they be spending? So for example, what you might end up building is an interface or a guide that allows you conversationally to say, hey, just out of curiosity, do you have one of these? Do you have an endpoint protection platform? Yep, great. Do you have an endpoint detection response system? Yes, great. So you go through the several primary categories that they may or may not have a solution that you can then impact. So then you would kind of say, all right, well, let's talk about out of curiosity who you might be working with these, and you can have it as a fill in the blank or a drop down. If there's 3 to 5 to 10 primary suspects that they may have as an incumbent provider. And then you've got your lookup table behind the scenes where you understood that this was a company with 1,000 employees, and your lookup table based on some just back of the envelope says that companies with 1,000 employees that have an endpoint protection platform are spending on the order of $90,000. It's a starting point. It's probably not right for this customer, but it's the right order of magnitude. They're probably not spending $1 million, probably not spending 5,000. So we're trying to get in the right order of magnitude. Then we say, hey, listen, do you happen to know? The person you're talking to may or may not know, and they may or may not share that information in that particular call. But what we're building up is a framework. So the framework then allows us to say, okay, based on back of the envelope analysis, they're spending $500,000 across these 3 categories that they say they have spent: endpoint protection, network detection response, and SIEM. And you get some alignment around. Does it sound like it's about $500,000? Yes or no? It's not 5 million, it's not 10,000, not 20,000, right? So then you as the vendor need to kind of have an estimate to say, if they have an endpoint protection platform, is my solution functionally equivalent to that in most cases, and can I displace that spend? And if the answer is yes, and you can displace it 100%, then you would say, well, tell the buyer, well, roughly, I think we might be able to save 100% of that spend and consolidate that. So you're going to save $89,000 here. We can't do everything that your network detection response solution can, but we can do a piece of it. So you may be able to reduce some of that spend or redirect some of that traffic towards our platform. And with a SIEM, we think we can get some of that back. There's people in the SIEM, and there's things that are happening that we may not be able to save 100% of that. Now, these are starting points. You're equipping your buyer to kind of have a perspective that they can take to their financial buyer internally to say, yeah, okay, perhaps we can save on the order of $250,000, $260,000 with your solution as the new cybersecurity vendor. Now, we haven't talked about yet what our solution costs. So are they going to pay us $50,000 to save $260,000? Are they going to pay us $150,000? We have some room in here now, if this is credible, to kind of have a pricing discussion. So this is hard cost savings, uncovering the value driver. What are they spending money on today, and what can I possibly address or displace? Okay, moving to the next value driver area, which is productivity. Okay, this one, in our experience, I would say most, if not all, of the people on the call today are probably your solution is probably helping make the people that you're selling to more productive. We see that nearly 100% of the time. So the question is, how do we then quantify this, and what do we do with it? Well, the first thing that we want to do is just determine what is the functional group that I'm helping. So I'm going to shift to HR tech. So if I'm selling a solution that makes you more effective with recruiting, I'm going to understand, well, how many people are involved in the recruiting function. Okay, so there's a VP of HR, and that person has 7 people on their team. There's a variety of sources to estimate the salary for those people, salary.com and others. But the trick then is to try to figure out, how do they spend their time activity-wise over the course of a week or a month, or what % of their time are they spending in a particular activity area? If I can count up the activities specifically, i.e., emails sent, or phone calls made, or interviews held, like those, if I'm actually optimizing those specific activities and I can measure them, that's one way to do it. On the other hand, if I'm just scanning pools of candidates and resumes, and I'm spending 20% of my day doing that, and it's easy, it's harder. I might think about it like that. So I can come at it from both angles. Now, people wonder sometimes, how can I build an estimate on the number of people in a function? Well, this is where Sales Navigator, and they're not paying me for this, is a pretty good place to be in that they have a capability here called which allows you to search by function. So you can type in the name of the company you're investigating and the function. In this case, I typed in information technology, and this now returns 300 results of information technology people. And we find that it's pretty good. I would guess that the real answer for this company is probably between 250 and 300, but it's probably not 1,000. It's probably not 40. And then, of course, I can refine the search further by certain keywords, i.e., if I want to search for security, et cetera. But this allows me to say, okay, and again, just choose a salary number, just choose 100,000 for the sake of argument. This organization might be spending 300 times $100,000, which is $30 million on people in IT. Okay, that's interesting. If I'm selling a solution that's costs $100,000 to a group of people that is spending 30 million in salary, if I can get some of that time back, is that valuable? Is that a good trade-off? Probably, right? That's a good starting point to be. Okay, and Tony, I think I'm going to get to a place where I'm going to then open it to say, if people want to dive into one of these, we can go into those and come back and get into some more detail. Okay, so the next category, I'm in the third category now, which is revenue loss. Now, this one is easier than a lot of people think to get started. Okay, and again, if you're dealing with a public company, which in many cases we aren't, but if we are, their revenue is obviously published in a variety of places. Most of the time, we're selling to private companies, and we can be pretty effective in using a revenue per employee estimate as a proxy, and LinkedIn as a really good estimate for employee count. The one thing LinkedIn will miss is if the company has a lot of offshore people. If my whole customer success or customer support organization is offshore, that could be another 50 or 200 people offshore. So I need to kind of think about that. But if it's I've got most of the key employees are in the U.S. or Europe or Asia, they're generally on LinkedIn. And so if I were dealing with a company, call it with 500 employees, I would probably choose 200K as a revenue per employee estimate and say that company's probably doing around $100 million in revenue. The answer is going to be probably between 80 and 150 or 200. But again, it's not a $5 billion company, and it's not a $5 million company. So let's say it is a 500-person company doing $100 million in revenue. If they've got a churn rate of, call it 5%, well, they're churning $5 million in revenue per year, and they're trying to grow at 10%, or they're trying to add 10 million to the top line while they're trying to avoid losing 5 million. Okay, and I do that back of the envelope very quickly. So if I'm selling a technology that's going to help them grow revenue, I want to be able to say it's going to help. I'm going to add $500,000 to that $10 million growth number, i.e. 5% of the 10 million. Or if they're churning 5 million, I want to save a few percent of that 5 million. I want to save them a couple $100,000 at least in churn reduction. So those are my anchors based on real data, and I haven't even talked to them yet. When I start talking to them, I confirm the churn numbers, I confirm the growth rate targets, I confirm the actual revenue numbers. And then again, I want to visualize this. This is one of the more fun ones to visualize because having a very modest impact on either the top line targets or the churn targets, has a real impact on their growth, and particularly if they're a subscription company and their valuation is based on recurring revenue and a valuation on that, the multiplier on that incremental revenue is very, very substantial. So that's a great story to the CFO. But what we're showing in this picture as an example is if I've got a technology that helps get more leads, and so many companies are helping their buyers get more leads. If I can actually do that, I don't have to hire a bunch of SDRs to get to the same results. And you can, and I can play with a sensitivity analysis where even if this blue line comes down quite a bit, it'll have an impact. So doing the sensitivities on growth, impact on growth and churn, and then showing that visually can have a very good impact. Risk is the final one. Now, this one is the one that people tend to struggle with the most. And they struggle here because your client is probably not going to want to tell you how many bad things happened to them in the last 12 months. How many data breaches did they have? How many times, if they're closing the books, did they mess up closing the books? How many patients in the hospital had a problem like sepsis and they had to go back into the hospital for 5 days? So, however, this is where you really have to use Google or analyst reports or AI to say, in general, the rate for a hospital with 1,000 patients of, the incidence of sepsis is 4.5%. So what that means is if you're an average hospital, out of every 1,000 patients, 45 of them are going to have sepsis. Now, if you've got a solution that's going to minimize that, even if you save 5 or 10 of those people from getting sepsis, that was 5 to 10 more days in the hospital. So I just saved 25 to 100 hospital days on that 1,000-person organization. And then they'll say, actually, our incident rate is better than average. Once you start putting the numbers in front of them, they'll say, actually, yeah, we only have 2.5% as a rate. Or I'm going to shift back to accounting. We actually had no problem closing our books in the last 12 months. The average company does have to restate books twice a year. We had 0. Okay. But when you restate, it costs you 100 hours and refiling fees and all these things. So if you restate, it costs you $25,000. So that's what we're doing here. So you really, this is an important one because the CFO probably is aware of the number of incidents they have had in the last 12 months. They may not be, they haven't calculated the total cost, but the analyst report, so cybersecurity has a great one called Ponymon, for example. They'll tell you what that cost is. So you can walk in and confidently say, I don't know what happened to you last year, but if you're an average company over the next 1 to 3 years, you should expect 1 to 5 of these bad things to happen, and it's going to cost you X. And our solution is going to minimize that chance dramatically. And if it does happen, we're going to help you recover faster. It's going to minimize the cost. Okay, so once you've got those 4 value drivers roughly fleshed out, then what you're going to want to do in this, to get this to a good starting point, it's probably a couple iterations over a couple of weeks. If you do have a number of customers where you have some case studies or you can get some testimonials and they're willing to kind of quantify their results, great. If you don't have that, that's okay. Research reports and analyst reports can talk about best in class. You can talk to, again, primary research talks about what the best in class numbers are. This information allows you to build a starting point analysis, and we have a sample Excel model to show if anybody wants to take a peek at just a back of the envelope model that can apply to all of these. The math is not really complicated. It's really getting the structure right to go through the different categories and then choosing smart improvement factors based on either your experience or analyst reports, and then benchmark data that say your average company is spending so much time or having so much waste doing what they're doing today that you can have a starting point analysis. And your deliverables then will be a model, a talk track. And as you saw as I've gone through this, I've kind of had a conversational talk track around this, and we want to practice it ourselves and or equip our sellers to kind of back into the numbers with the client and give them something they can show visually that's, charts, perhaps a PowerPoint or Google Slides deck, and then some email copy that we can then share with our advocate and expect that will be forwarded and shared internally. So that's what we want to achieve. Now, just
Mike, before we proceed, so let me interject with a few questions here. So I think that you broke down the 4 different categories to understand cost and risk. And I think most of the people on this call or on this webinar know some level of pain from a categorical level that they're solving for. I think the challenge, again, I'm projecting here, but I'm assuming the challenge is more along the lines of how do you find the data points to support the actual numbers of value to bring forward to a prospect. And I know you gave some examples of potential sources such as LinkedIn and how to go about it. Are there any other specific approaches or resources that you feel like has helped you in the past to try to uncover what those actual data points are? That's first one. And then second one, finding benchmark or back of the envelope type of numbers to identify hard costs and risk of losing efficiency. How do you then make sure that you're within the ballpark so that when you're talking to a prospect that you actually sound intelligent and you're not way off the mark? Because what's really off-putting, and I've been on the receiving end of stuff like this before, and I'm sure you and many of our attendees have been as well, is when a sales rep reaches out to me and then makes all the assumptions and they're nowhere close to what we're experiencing, right? And so kind of a two-part question, but they're related. How do you go about finding the actual value or the quantitative value that you're trying to communicate, whether it's hard costs or productivity loss or revenue loss or risk?
Okay, well, yeah, and I think the way those last 3 points, Tony, are important. Hard cost, productivity, and risk. It's 3 different things, and so I'm gonna kind of come back and go through each of those. Productivity is. I'm going to start with this one because this is probably one of the easier ones to wrap our minds around because it relates to people that are doing activities. Okay, so when we're trying to figure out how much time we can deliver to a group of people back, we know a couple things. Number one, we know there's typically 40-hour work hours in a week. There's 2,000 work hours in a year. If we understand this functional group, whether they're HR professionals or marketing professionals, or one of the questions from Sam was on manufacturing, which maybe it's people on an assembly line assembling things. We can estimate what percentage of their time they're doing a certain activity. The first thing we should do is say, let's create a list of all their activities. Maybe they have 20 activities over the course of a week. We can roughly put them into buckets. Once we've created a structure that says, 5% of their time is here, 10% is here, 25% is here, we can then again ask Google, ask AI, and or do primary research to just confirm, is this close? Does this look right? There are activity studies, that we can find across these categories. That's breaking people's time into buckets. That's generally doable to have a starting point. Now, to your point, if you then walk into a customer and say, hey, your HR team is probably spending 20% of their time combing LinkedIn profiles. They might say, actually, no, they're spending 0% of their time doing LinkedIn. We don't do that anymore. Oh, okay. So if you set it up as conversational, that's fine. So great. Let me flip this to 0. So I guess they're spending more of their time over here, which is talking to candidates, which is what you want them to do. Great. Okay, so I'm going to bump this one up. I think that the scenario you presented, Tony, was the sales rep came in and was basically like, I've got the final answer. Here it is. Versus, we've looked at 100 companies. This is what average companies are doing. Our goal today is to collaborate with you and see if you're like an average company or not across these categories. This is a collaborative discussion. I'm leading with what I think you would be like if you were an average company, but you're probably not. So our goal here is to refine these. But I've got starting points, and then pop open the analyst report, whether it's Forrester or Gartner or Ponymon for cybersecurity. It's like, here's what the analyst is saying is typical for how people spend their time. Coming to risk, okay, so I'm going to go to the risk one. Again, this one is in some ways one of the easier ones if you come at it the right way, which is to say, if you ask Google or ask AI, what percent of time is something happening, either return to hospital or drivers having accidents while they're driving down the road or data breaches. There are reports that so you'll say, for a 1,000-person organization, they're typically getting one data breach a year. There's probably a report that says that. Your job, by the way, is to curate these different sources and then point to, this is where AI, you got to be careful with AI because AI doesn't always give you the source. If you want to be credible with a customer, say, Tony Mon says this, or this analyst says this, and then, you know, AI can get you started, but then come to a real source to back it up. And then the other category is hard cost. And the Sam again was asking about manufacturing. You know, so you could be manufacturing a whole bunch of different kinds of things. You could be manufacturing cars. You could be manufacturing components for, you know, computers. What you would do is, again, understand each of the steps in that manufacturing process and what are the raw materials. You kind of need to build up a raw material. They call it a bill of materials, your BOM. And again, that would be something that Google or AI would probably tell you, what is the BOM for this, for a car engine? What is the BOM for an airplane wing? And then there's a pricing guide, again, that you can build up. You're going to want to ask your customer, you know, are you getting your materials from a certain country? And there'll be a lookup table to say the BOM, if they source from this country, is X. If they source from this area, it's Y. So why don't I pause, Tony? Is this directionally where you want me to take it?
Yeah, I think so. And so maybe a follow-up question to this line of question is going back to your slide around the sales cycle and the different deal stages. It sounds like part of the back and forth and discussion uncovering what is actually a hard cost or, you know, any one of these potential value drivers, if you will, is going to be done in a discovery phase. Does that sound accurate to you? Or should a seller actually even plan on trying to do a little bit of research even before they hop on the first call with a prospect?
So one concept to keep in mind when you're selling into the enterprise is you're selling into a committee, okay? And on your first call, you've got one person or maybe two, but behind the scenes, there's probably 6 or 10 or 15 or 20. So this is evolutionary discovery, really. I'm trying to discover on my first call with someone who's probably lower in the chain, whatever I possibly can. And it's going to be limited. They're going to have one view, one set of data, one view of the world. So I'm going to discover qualitative pain points and anything I can quantify from this person. I'm going to start to fill it in. But short answer is yes. I want to start confirming actual pain points and quantifying it with that first call. But then on my next call, there's probably going to be a couple more people on the phone that know a couple more things than that first person. I'm going to want to confirm what I heard, have those other people add to it, and then get them to, in an unbiased way, talk about their pain points. So anything else that you would want to understand, Susan, about your neck of the woods, because your function is this. Are you dealing with any of these challenges? So I want to build challenges and possible pains by persona and have those ready to go, and then quantify those for each of those personas. So I'm building and refining my cost estimate, but I want to have a starting point coming out of that first call of a back of the envelope pain estimate or current cost estimate.
Cool. We do have a question that came in that's related to what a comment you just said around personas. And so I'm going to read the question and I'm going to frame it in a certain way. Okay, so the question is, we sell to legal departments, which are our cost center. Does anything shift if it's not a revenue generating department? And then the second part of that question is, should we just go directly to the CFO or go to the, you know, general counsel or legal operations? Could be the, you know, the end user group, if you will. So you brought the concept of persona. So is there a difference in terms of the category of value that you need to communicate across different people in that buying committee that you just described?
Yeah, great. I love this question, Anmol. Thank you for that. And I want to come back to this picture here. Okay, so I meant to say earlier, there is a science and there's also an art to this whole endeavor. So I think I understand what you're talking about. That you're selling to an organization of in-house attorneys. All right, so let's say it's a 1,000-person company and they have chief counsel who reports to the CFO, and they've got 5 attorneys on staff, right? And they are generally considered a cost center. However, guess what? Those folks are working on a variety of contracts over the course of a quarter, right? Some of those contracts relate to revenue generating contracts. They're supporting their sales team in getting deals across the line. They're also helping procurement functions get new contracts in the door, right? And maybe working on contracts represents 60 to 70% of what they do. Well, you can conceive of a scenario where here it is December 14th, and there's 16 days left in the quarter, and these folks have 40 contracts that they're trying to get done. 20 of them are revenue generating, 20 are procurement related. Without your solution, they're not going to be able to get to 10 of those contracts. So we lost revenue. So what I would be doing is I would be saying, let's take a look at, for these 5 folks, what are all the types of things that they do, and put them in buckets. And you're the thought leader, so you should know, 20% of their time is, or 40% of their time is revenue related contracts, 20% are cost related contracts. Maybe they're dealing with, certain types of legal situations as well. Productivity is key. Yeah. So your solution is going to save them time. So right now they're spending, I don't know, 20% of their time on discovery. Your discovery is your solution is going to help them minimize that time. So they're going to get hours back, which they like getting hours back. So the short answer to the question is we need to look at each of these categories, any function we're selling to. We need to be creative as we do it. And then your second question on that do we go directly to the CFO? And I think the answer is this allows you to sell high to the CFO, maybe perhaps as part of outbound. So I can outbound a value message to the CFO. Maybe I can also engage with an attorney or a chief counsel directly on their specific pain points that we know they have. So it allows me to have 2 messages for 2 types of buyers. It's not either or.
Got it. Okay. And then to piggyback off of that last question and your closing comments with that, there's a related question from Sevket. So his question is, sometimes in enterprise, the IT team or legal team can hold up a deal process for too long. A lot of times these people don't get on call. So what would be your recommendations to get those back on track? If they're not necessarily the main decision maker, but they are just definitely part of the decision process, or in sales methodology for different roles could be, for example, a technical buyer, but not necessarily the main decision maker. What are your recommendations for getting their attention and moving the deal along?
Great question, Sevket. I think everyone on this call either has dealt with this or will deal with it. You're absolutely right. And this is where the value selling can really, really help. And the idea is you've got a business sponsor who is not the IT team or the legal team, and you're right, and that you won't meet the IT team or the legal team. But what you want to do is equip your business sponsor with your value estimate. And so let's say your value estimate is we're going to save you $1 million over the next 12 months. Well, divide that by 12, that's $80,000 per month, okay? You can equip your business sponsor to say, to tell the IT and the legal folks, hey, by the way, if this slips another month or 2, it's another 80 to 150K. It requires a lot of, requires a bit of savvy to do that. Sometimes if that's documented by your business sponsor, you could mention to the IT and legal folks, hey, by the way, we've agreed that this is it's costing us $80,000 a month now to solve this problem. Or you could talk about those specific pain points. If you're in DevOps, by the way, you're going to let another 5,000 lines of code go out with bugs next month. These are kind of tactics. Helps. I like to schedule calls with my business sponsor and the IT and legal people at the same time, and then that helps get it along. But it's a tricky one. I'm giving you a couple of ideas.
Got it. And then we do have a couple of questions that, again, they're all sort of related. I think we just naturally evolved into a Q&A section or a time period. Sure. And I know you have a couple of slides that were part of your presentation. So do you want to wrap those 2 up, or do you just want to continue with the Q&A?
Yeah, let me wrap up the questions, and I'll go through those quickly and then come back to the Q&A. I think there were just a couple, just 1 or 2 quick points. We ran our engine against some of the Mucker portfolio companies, and this is based on data on your website. So the good news is we are all talking about value drivers on our website. Sometimes we have case studies and testimonials that quantify them. sometimes we don't, but our buyers are reading these nuggets on our websites, and they're kind of waiting and hoping that when they get on the call with us, we're going to be able to quantify it. And some of you have actually quantified these things, and now, and the good news is, if we've done any of this, we should be able to convert these data points into specific value messages for buyers. And if we're not, we're kind of expecting it. So it's a good problem to have, but now we got to convert it into a one-to-one selling tool. But these are great starting points. To really build a plan around this for your organization, I know many of you have small sales teams. Think about a customer segment that's a big segment that you're selling into, whether it's manufacturing or healthcare or hospitals or doctors' offices. Try to really understand that segment and understand where they're spending money, where are they spending their activities. Have a very solid story there. And if your model doesn't work for all types of buyers on day one, that's okay. Make it just come to life really in an engaging way. You can survey existing customers or do industry analyses or primary research, but don't give up and say, I don't know, my customers won't tell me. Have a starting point based on some research. This dovetails into what Tony was saying. Make it visual, make it compelling, use images, drop numbers on images. This is part of what our software does. It makes it all visual, come to life. Use charts, use data. Again, the AI actually makes this a bit easier now. It's really good. Google's still good. LinkedIn's good. And then I think longer term, over time, make this someone's job on your team, whether it's a full-time person or even a part-time person or a consultant, to there's a champion, they're driving success, they're doing the value part of this. It requires kind of an investment and at least some kind of partial commitment to keep iterating on it, because you're going to iterate on this. You're not one and done on it. Okay, so I can go back to the questions.
Okay. All right. One quick question is, if you are a product or have a product that could provide value for more than one of those 4 buckets, is it best just focus on one, or do you want to cover all of them? Does that dilute your effectiveness of your messaging?
No, you definitely want to hit both of them. It does not dilute. You definitely want to hit both of them. You just have to be, and in this picture here, it's a little small, but ultimately what we're showing is revenue, churn, and then cost, productivity, and hard costs. You want to make sure you differentiate them in your presentation. So you want to have a chart that shows cost consolidation and make that point standalone, or productivity gain standalone, and then the revenue, make sure that is clear in and of itself. What they've done a nice job of here is they're breaking out cost savings from risk savings to productivity gains, and then make sure you have backup and support for each. But the reason you want to have both is this allows you then to have multiple internal advocates. There are people inside of your customer that care about revenue, and there's people inside of your customer that care about productivity, and there's people that care about both. But make sure both of those arguments are solid. And if one is a little bit more aspirational, like maybe revenue protection is more aspirational, come to that second. Start with your strength and then come to the other one and call it gravy.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing your knowledge on this very important topic. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.